Hi, welcome to Scattered Terrain. My name is Meredith, and today I'm going to show you how I make my trees.
Alright, let's start off with what you're gonna need. First of all, you're gonna need paper towels. You're also gonna need a fair bit of PVA glue. Personally, I like Elmer's, but whatever PVA you can get will work just fine. You're also gonna need some parchment paper because hot glue will not stick to this. But I don't need a full sheet. Let's break this down a bit. That's better. Just get this out of the way here. You're also gonna need some washers to give some weight to the base of your trees. These are going to keep them from tipping over when we're done. You're going to need a hot glue gun, and for this particular project, you're going to need one that has a temperature setting. And you're going to need paint for your tree bark and a brush to put it on with. Oh, and you're going to need a second color to dry brush with. You're going to need some crafter's moss or lichen, depending on where you're shopping. And then you're gonna need the foliage for the trees. Now, I got this first batch at the pet store in the fish and aquarium plants section. And then when I was at Michael's, I found a rather large sheet of these. And as you can see, other than the 3 to 4 frond different, these two are practically identical. So it's really just a question of what you can get your hands on. And finally, you're going to need some black wash and a fine misting spray bottle to apply it. Alright, so we're going to start off with a paper towel. Now, a full-sized paper towel is going to be a little too big for the scale we're working on, so you only need half a paper towel to start. Now you're going to fold that in half on itself to give it thickness, and then you're going to fold it so that you get 2 corners into the middle. That way, as we start twisting it here, you're going to have a nice thick center tapering out to smaller points. Now, when we cut this in half later, it's going to make for a beautiful thick base of the tree going up to a much thinner branch at the end. All right, and then we're going to set this onto a plastic tray so that when we put our PVA and water on it, it's not going to stick to the surface that it's drying on. Now, to go with our main trunk, we also are going to need some smaller branches. So you're going to take a half of a half and then put its points together and start twisting just like we did with the doubled sheet. And you're going to see that this gives you a much thinner branch. And then to go once more even smaller, you're going to take that final quarter and divide it into quarters. So we're now looking at a 1/16 of your paper towel. And then same thing, you're going to put the points together and start twisting, and that is going to give you the root system and potentially any tiny additional branches that you want to add. So we'll just make up several of these, that way we've got some options to work with. And you want to twist your fingers in opposite directions to really help get that twist easier. Alright, and as you can see here, the reason that we're folding it point to point is to get that desired shape of that thick in the middle and thin on the ends. You can see here that if we just roll it up lengthwise, we get a much more uniform tube. And while that can be useful if that's what you're going for, that's not what we're looking for here. So for our next step, we need to soak our paper towel twists in a mixture of half PVA glue, half water. And this is going to soak in and harden as it dries to give us a nice strong structure to start our tree with. So I just keep it stored in the bottle for easy application to the pieces here. And the first time you run over the paper towel, it's not really going to soak in much. You're going to have to visit it again in just a minute, and the second coat you put on is going to absorb much better once it's gotten started. And so you just want to make sure that all of your pieces are well soaked. And then we're going to twist again to make sure we really work that mixture all the way through our twist here. If you don't have enough, this is definitely the time to just add a little bit more. And so then you're going to take it and twist it past where you need to twist it just to get that spiral going and start to cause it to curl in on itself. This is going to evoke a very natural curve in the dried pieces. And as you set it on the tray, it definitely is going to untwist itself a bit. You can sort of counteract this by either putting objects into the tray like balls of crumpled aluminum foil that you drape your paper towels over, or you can just tuck them into the corners and up against the edge so that as they start to unwrap a bit, they get held in place. And so you just repeat the process with all of your twists, regardless which of the 3 sizes. You want to make some of them U-shapes. Some of them you want to try and go for more of an S if you can. Really, you just want to make sure that in the end you get some variety. And if you're getting a bit dry, you can try and soak up what's on the tray. It's a lot easier to just add more from the bottle. All right, and then I'm just gonna tuck the pieces against the edges here as best I can so that they don't unwrap any farther as they're drying. And then we're gonna give it one final hit with a little bit of extra PVA and water, just to make sure that these are gonna get good and firm. All right, and then we just set these aside to dry. I'm gonna go wash my hands. All right, and with the magic of video, I've got these twists that are already dried that I prepared ahead. Now we're gonna take a look at these and, looking from the halfway point, decide which one has the best natural shape to it to make the trunk of our tree. As an idea of what you're looking for here, this particular tree, you can see that one main twist that it's built on and just foliage added on top. Now, depending on your shape, you can also have it branch as it gets partway up. You can see here we've got that one shape going forward, and then a second branch that we've affixed on the side. So these are some things to consider while you're evaluating your paper towel twists. You can even go as far as having 3 branches come out, which is going to make for a different look to your end result. I find having a good variety of these 3 options in my forest helps to give it a more natural look, less cookie cutter. Oh, and I forgot to mention this before, you're also going to need a pair of scissors. So once you've decided which of your twists is going to make the best tree, you're going to just cut them in half. Now you can get through this even once it's dry because there is still a certain soft pliability to the PVA soaked paper towel. And then you're going to want to make sure after you cut it with the scissors that you squeeze and roll where you cut back into shape because it is going to get flattened out by the pressure of the blades. You're going to take your square of parchment paper and put your washer down in the center of it, if I can get a hold of it, and then using hot glue, you're going to stick your paper towel twist to the parchment paper right through the center of the washer. And this is why we're using parchment paper for this, because hot glue, once dry, peels right off of parchment paper. Now it's important to make sure when you're doing this that you're paying attention to what angle you're holding the trunk at as you're attaching it to the paper. However you glue this down is how your final tree is going to stand. So if you want to have a hard angle, this is the time. If you want to make sure it is perfectly straight up and down, then you're going to need to hold it real careful here. All right, now we're going to grab all of the smallest paper towel twists that we made to take a look at making them into tree roots. So take a look and see which ones have angles that you like, and then you're going to use the scissors to cut at a pretty sharp angle along the roll because you're going to open up that slice and lay it flat against the trunk of your tree. That way it really smooths into the base of the trunk without seeming like it's suddenly coming out as a round knob or lump. And I always do a dry test fit. Make sure this is going to look like what I want it to. It's going to fit where I want to put it. When I'm sure I know where I want it to go, just put a little bit of hot glue on and press it into place. Now this is where it starts to matter that you have a hot glue gun that can have low temperature settings. If your hot glue gun does not have high and low, you don't want to get your fingers this close to the hot glue. It will burn you. You want to be careful. This hot glue gun on the low setting, after 5 or 6 seconds, it's pretty safe for me to touch it without burning my fingers, but I've got some good calluses built up. Then you're going to want to peel back the parchment and lay hot glue down along anything that sticks out past the edge of the washer. And then holding it flat to the table, you want to go ahead and just shape that root and stick it down and hold it for a couple seconds until the hot glue has had a chance to cool a little. And then you're going to do the same thing again. Now while you're doing this, you want to keep in mind to try and vary the height of how far up the base of the tree you're attaching the root. You want to have some of them start higher than others. That way it gives a more natural variation. If all the roots start at the same height all the way around the tree, it starts to look a little strange. In addition to how high up the tree you're starting each root, you also want to look at what the root does as it leaves the tree at the bottom. You don't want them all to be curling around in the same direction. You want some of them to be straight, some of them to be curved in one way, some to curve another way. You can even have some of them overlap each other to get more of that gnarled old tree look at the base. All right, and then you just work your way all the way around your tree, and don't worry about filling everything in. We're going to fill those gaps in later and make it look like earth coming through, so you don't want too many tree roots around your tree. All right, any extra root pieces that you don't use, put aside and save. I'm going to show you what I do with those at the end of the video. So this brings us now to using that mid-size twist that we made. These are going to be for the upper branches of the tree. Now this tree's got a pretty good angle to it, so I'm going to put a single branch coming off the other way at around the midpoint. I find it really helps to just take the pieces that I've got and just hold them up to my trunk and get an idea of what it would look like if I used that one. Now this one, I like the look of this one. It's not quite bent enough, so I'm just going to gently shape it into place. At this point, the paper towel twists are still fairly pliable. They're going to stiffen up a lot more when we put the paint on in our next step. So yeah, I like the look of this one. So we cut it off, again at that nice angle so that it smooths into the trunk when we glue it on. It doesn't make a lump. Dry fit, make sure it's looking the way I want it to look. And hot glue it in place. And on the low setting, the hot glue cools remarkably quickly, so I really only have to press it down for a few moments before I'm able to let go and it holds itself in place. And you know what? This guy is still looking a little plain for me, so I think I'm going to add a third branch, make it a little more interesting. So I just take the other half of what I cut off, open that end up, and hot glue it into place. Now be cautious when you're gluing these in place that you're not putting too much hot glue onto your branch, or it's going to seep out and stick your fingers to the tree for a minute. If this happens, don't panic. Just wait until it cools, and then using a rocking motion, slowly pull your finger away from the glue. And you can use your fingernails to just clean up any edges that peeled up when you pulled away. And all right, yeah, I'm liking the look of that now. It's got a bit of an off-balance, natural look. And again, put these aside with the other extra twists you had left over, and we'll get to them at the end. Just clean up a bit here. Always good to clean as you go. And then once the hot glue is completely dry, we can clean up the edges here. Just pinch off any bits that ran out from beneath the roots and peel it off the parchment paper. All right, so now that we've got our basic tree shape made, our next step is to do our base coat of paint. Now personally, I'm in a fantasy setting, so I'm not too worried about realistic color choices, so I'm painting my tree brown. Always give your paint a good shake before you start. All right, we're going to use my very fancy mason jar lid palette here. Good non-absorbent surface, cleans well. And as you can see, I'm using a damp brush to start here. I find that that makes the beginning of the painting much easier and I don't waste nearly as much paint soaking into my brush. And then we just do a nice solid coat of your base color all over the tree. I didn't put nearly enough paint out to cover this whole project. Let's just get a little more here. Now we are going for 100% coverage here, but if you find later that there are little white bits poking through that you missed, don't worry about it. We'll be able to cover those up later. All right, and so now that we've got a nice solid coating of our base color, we just need to let it dry. I'll take this. All right, now that that's dry to the touch, we can move on to our next step, dry brushing. So grab that second color of paint. Now as you can see here, I've changed brushes. This brush has seen better days and I've cut some bits and pieces off it over time, but it makes an excellent dry brush for rough surfaces. So you don't need nearly as much paint with this technique. You're going to put a little bit onto your palette, and then with your brush completely dry, you're going to work paint into the bristles at the end. And then you're going to take almost all of that paint off onto your paper towel here. Sometimes it takes a couple applications at first to really work enough paint into the brush that you have any left over. And so then you're going to take your brush and you're going to drag it very gently over the surface of your tree in a downward motion. And that's going to put this paint just on the highest surfaces and really bring out all that wonderful texture of your paper towel. Dry brushing has got to be one of my favorite steps in the terrain making process. And like with your first color, you want to go ahead and just dry brush the entire thing. Pretty even coating all over. And there we have it, one dry brushed tree. Just look at all that texture. All right, now that our paint is dry, it's time to apply the foliage. So grab your plastic plants and your scissors, and let's get started. Now you're going to want to take your plastic plant and use your scissors to break it down into smaller pieces. As a bonus, this means you get these cool little plastic shapes at the end. I'll have to hold on to this for later. Now you're going to take one of your smaller pieces of plant, and I always start at the very tip of the branch. If you start at the tip and work your way backwards, it's going to be much easier. You put a little dollop of hot glue onto the tip of your branch, into one of the little folds if you can manage it. And then you're going to stick the plastic stem of your plant into the hot glue. Now, after a second, you're going to want to use your thumb and press the hot glue flat into the texture of your paper towel. This helps to keep all of the branches much flatter and allows you to build more of them up without becoming a bumpy, lumpy mess underneath. This is also why it is very important that you're using a low temperature hot glue gun. I cannot stress this enough. You put the glue on low temp, you stick your plastic plant into it, and you're waiting several seconds at this point after application before finally using your thumb to finish the cooling process and press it smooth. Now, from time to time when you're doing this, as you start to pull away, you'll find you've stuck yourself to the tree. Just wait that little bit of extra time like before and rock your finger off after it's cool. Usually only takes 5 or 6 seconds. So I'm going to go around the tree and I'm going to put a few clumps of foliage on the very tip of each branch. And then I'm just slowly going to start working down the branch from there, building a nice clump at the end of each branch as I go. You're also going to find as you add your leaves, if you try and stay all at the end of the branch, you're going to wind up with a stick with some puffballs on it. So as you're adding your leaves, you want to work your way down the branch, from time to time, leaving a large space between where you were clumping your foliage and where you're going to start clumping it next. And as you add more and more of the plastic plant to the branches, you're going to see the overall shape of your tree begin to emerge. Think of it almost as sculpting with plastic plants. You're looking at that overall silhouette and shape that you're getting, as well as looking at the actual clump you're making. Now, if you see a spot you think might need an extra little clump, go ahead and dry fit a piece in, see if it gives you the look you want. And if it does, it's real easy to just peel the leaves back when they're cool, add a little dollop of hot glue in there, and just press your piece in place. Now, you definitely want to hold this until it cools because the other leaves will try and force it out of place. Now, as you finish the upper leaves, you're going to want to start cutting some of your plants down to be smaller and shorter. That way the bottom part of the bushiness of your tree is filled in as well. You're going to want to stick some of these smaller pieces farther down on the trunk as well to indicate places where there's a new branch growing in. All right, and let's just get these little bits we're not using anymore out of the way and give our tree a once over. And you can see right here, it needs a little something more. So we're gonna dry fit this piece in, see what effect that's gonna have. Yeah, looks good. Peel back the branches, add a little dot of hot glue, and press the leaves into place. If there are parts of your tree that look a little uneven, sometimes all it takes is just interweaving the branches with each other a little bit, just sort of playing with how they're lining up. I've got another spot here that looks a little bare. Let's grab one more piece. All right, and then we'll give it a final once over. Take a look at it from all angles. Rearrange a couple things here. Yeah, that's better. Now, this side of the tree, it's looking very bare right through here. So I think I'm going to add a couple more of those little clumps. Now, the beauty of this technique is if you're putting a clump on the side and you don't really like where it lands, while the glue is still a little bit warm, you can just peel it right off the tree and start over. All right, and I think that is gonna do it. I like the way it looks. So we're gonna stick our tree back down to its parchment paper. Now, you're gonna wanna go ahead and give a nice thin coating of your hot glue to all of the underside, the washer, the roots, everybody. And then press down gently but firmly straight to the center of your parchment, and it gives us a nice clean surface for our next step. So now you're gonna grab your crafting moss, or your lichen, and we're gonna hot glue a couple of chunks around the base of the tree. This is gonna simulate the ground cover and plant life growing up amongst the roots. You're gonna take a nice little chunk of your moss that looks like it'll fit into one of the openings, put a good sized dollop of hot glue to fill the space, and then you're gonna just press the lichen straight into the hot glue using a sort of a tapping motion with your thumb to slowly gather all of the little extra bits and compact them into that glue. Now you're going to want to use this technique to fill in those gaps in the root system all the way around the base of the tree. In order to give the tree more stability, you're going to want to make a little bit of a bigger footprint than just the washer itself. So make sure that you're keeping your tree flat on the table while pressing down the moss into the hot glue. That way you keep a nice flat base. Now, from time to time while you're doing this, you'll find that you have a little bit too much hot glue to moss, and some of the hot glue is going to seep through onto your fingers while you're pressing down. It's not a big deal as long as you're using that low temperature hot glue gun. Once the glue starts to cool a little, just peel it off the tips of your fingers. For the really large gaps to fill, you use the exact same method, just a little bit more hot glue and a lot more moss, and just press it down and hold it into place. Now, when you think you've got enough moss all the way around the base of your tree, you want to give it a stability test. And if it falls over like that, then you want to build out a little bit more hot glue and moss in the direction that it toppled to give it a little bit more support. Once you're done putting the moss into the root system, you're going to want to go up the trunk of the tree and put just little bits of hot glue along in places, and then tap the moss into it the same as you did around the roots. That way we get some nice mossy growth on the tree itself. That's really going to help blend your tree into the base of your terrain. All right, and you're going to give it that once over again, looking for any bare spots that jump out at you. And it looks like we need to have a little more right here. Ah, that's better. And of course, clean as you go. All right, looks good. On to our final step. Time to wash. I'm going to put down this nice piece of cardboard to protect my work surface, and I'm going to peel that piece of parchment paper off the bottom of the tree. Then go over the tree once more as a final check for any strings of hot glue or little bits of moss that aren't completely stuck down. And then I'm going to grab my spray bottle. Now this is a spray bottle that gives a nice fine mist. It's actually a spray bottle for cleaning your glasses, but once I was done using what was inside, gave it a good wash, and it works wonderfully. So I start off by giving a nice coating of the wash all over the underside of the branches and the trunk and base of the tree. And then I give it a good misting from all 4 directions from above. One of the nice things about using this spray wash technique is it creates a very molted final product. You get these little droplets of black on the leaves that have a sort of water spot effect, and it gives a very natural variation, I find. Now what's very important is when you're done washing, clean out your spray bottle. And now we just set him aside until the wash is dry. All right, and here it is, ready to go on the table. When the wash was dry, I did give it a quick clear coat of a matte varnish spray. I'm going to show you here a series of other trees that I've made using this technique to kind of give you an idea of some of the possibilities. And as you can see, if you change which type of plastic plant that you're using, you get an entirely different tree. It all really just depends on what plants are available in your area. I find when I mix at least 2 different types of plastic plants together on the table, I get a more realistic looking forest. You can also use this technique without any plastic plants at all and get some really gnarly looking dead trees. And now to show you why I had you save all those extra bits. I find that these leftover twists make wonderful fallen logs and branch piles. Just put them together in a bit of a jumbled shape, make sure it sits flat on the ground, and then apply paint and moss to them just like you would the trees. I find having a few dead branches scattered about really helps the look of my forest floor. So now that I've shown you my technique for making the trees, let's take a look at how they look on the table. You follow the tracks through the deep undergrowth, cutting your way through thorns and brush. The trail leads into a clearing, and you emerge from leafy shadows into the harsh glare of the midday sun. Suddenly, the ground beneath you begins to quake. Rising from the earth, you find yourself surrounded by 3 enormous stone golems. Roll for initiative.
And so there you have it, my basic trees. If you liked that, stick around. I'm going to show you how to make the bushes.
Thanks for spending some of your time here with me at Scattered Terrain. If you liked that video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.